everyone. What's going on? Welcome to a new edition of the Genesys Cloud Community's Q&A show, the show where we answer your pressing questions in the Genesys Cloud Community. My name is Matt Lawson. I am your online community manager, and today we have Richard Schott joining us again. You may remember him from a previous episode that was dedicated to our Salesforce integration. Well, he's back. By popular demand, I might add. Turns out a lot of you had more questions about our Salesforce integration and just wanted to know more about Richard. So why wait? Let's hop in and see what he's got planned for us. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Doing well, and you?
Good, I'm doing well. Looks like you've got some prehistoric carnage going on behind you.
Yeah. Just been kind of playing around, wound up in Jurassic Park, so it's a good time.
Nothing wrong with that. I guess I should start by saying congratulations to you, sir, because the community Q&A show had been around for, I think, around 8 episodes when you first came on last season as the Pure Cloud. It was in Pure Cloud then. And believe it or not, you were the first guest that actually prompted somebody not just to contact us about the show, but they went so far as to use our actual email. So congratulations. And
good deal. Very good deal.
And it revealed something that we didn't know, which was that our email was broken at the time. So maybe they weren't the first person to email us, but they were the first person to take that initial step and let us know that our email is in fact broken. But in all sincerity, we thank Tracy so much for reaching out after your last episode and wanting to bring you back on. So to start this episode off, I actually wanted to go back to what the conversation was that reunited us for this episode, because I know that we are going to talk about a couple of items that Tracy recommended. So Tracy wrote in and said, "Hi, Matt, great part 2 of the Pure Cloud and Salesforce setup with Richard. Would love to see follow-up videos on deeper dives into data actions, a set of omni-channel sync or other options, routing of non-call interactions, i.e. Richard showed a chat transcript sync last time, but what about other options for emails and etc." And then naturally they said in general, anything that can help us see the value of the integration would be great. So Tracy, all very good notes. Richard, after speaking with you, we kind of narrowed down what would be best for an episode, but in general, what did you think about Tracy's note? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so definitely some good points that were in there. One of the things, and we can also take a look at this when we get a little further into our demo. I'll touch on kind of where you find this, but the chat transcript is kind of it's a unique thing within our Salesforce integration in the way that we're writing content back into Salesforce. And there's some really specific reasons for us treating that one separately. So one of the most common use cases that we come across are Salesforce customers that are currently using Salesforce Live Agent for chat. Live Agent actually takes the contents of a chat interaction and tags it directly along with a case or a custom object or whatever other thing you're working on. So it's taking the content of that digital communication and embedding it directly inside the Salesforce environment, which is then used for other kind of interesting capabilities like training a Salesforce Einstein intent model. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't causing anyone who was considering migrating to using Genesys Cloud digital interaction channels from losing any of those things. We do have mechanisms to be able to bind conversations back into our activity records and make it so that those conversations are available. We just don't do it quite as directly as we do with chat. For all of those other interaction types, one of the things that we do is write the conversation object identifier, which I realize I'm getting a little far down in the weeds, but the people who are looking for this stuff will probably care about that. The call object identifier is a unique identifier that can then be used with the Genesys Cloud public APIs to fetch information about that interaction. So in the case of an email or an SMS interaction, we actually provide a link directly to the conversation page that lets you look at the recording of it, that includes all of the text associated with it. And that can also be used to hit the API and pull that information back into the Salesforce environment. So, there are mechanisms to be able to get at all of those things. We just don't make it quite as easy or seamless as we do with chat. That's something we'll be taking a look at moving forward. But for the time being, chat is really sort of it's a special thing. It's a little bit different than like email communications and other things like that. There are also some other options for working with email and creating kind of interesting integrations with the Salesforce platform that will be the subject of future Q&A shows.
Cool. Yeah. And I know in particular, when we were trying to set up this episode, you said that data actions could easily be a 2-hour conversation.
Yeah.
Same with like omnichannel and a couple of others. So yeah, like to that extent, everybody out there who's paying attention, if you would like for Richard to dive in on some of these topics, just shoot us an email or message us in the community, because we'd always love an excuse to have Richard back. He's one of the few people I know in the office who also watches college football like a maniac. So it's always pleasant to interact with him whenever I get to. All right, Richard, before these hungry dinosaurs behind you get any closer, why don't you go ahead and share what you have to give us a walkthrough on today?
What we're going to cover today is a little more information and a brief demo of the Workspace transfer functionality that we have within our Salesforce integration. So Workspace transfer is applicable in a couple different places within the Salesforce environment. And it's worth taking a step back to kind of understand some of the different ways that you might be able to consume Salesforce. So Salesforce today really has 4 principal modalities that you can consume it in. So the first is classic sales, which was the original iteration of Salesforce. It's what a lot of people think of when they hear Salesforce, because it's the one that's been around since the beginning. Then you get to Service Console, that is really a experience that's tailored around customer service representative. So it's designed to allow people to explore Salesforce really quickly without having to go through a whole bunch of page navigations. It allows you to assemble a bunch of interesting context about an individual interaction, and it really creates sort of the backbone for what we're doing with this Workspace transfer function. Now, recently, as in a couple of years ago, Salesforce released their Lightning experience, which was their sort of new mechanism for displaying the Salesforce UI and their attempt to kind of reimagine what does the CRM experience look like. Within Lightning, there is their standard navigation, which behaves a little more like classic sales, and there's console navigation, which behaves exactly like the old Service Console. So our Workspace transfer is really applicable to Service Console and the Lightning experience with console navigation, the latter of which is what we're currently looking at today. So anything with console navigation, what that actually refers to is that you're able to open multiple records within a single instance of the Salesforce console. So if you look on my screen here, I've actually got a bunch of main tabs that are open up across the top here. And then within the main tab, I've got these sub tabs, and these sub tabs are all associated with this main tab. So you'll notice that the main tab is actually the first tab that I open up over here. So on this particular case, I've looked at a case 1016. It's related to a contact, Edna Frank, who's related to an account, Jenna Point. It's also related to a chat conversation that I had with Edna previously, and a different case. And I'm also looking at the chat transcript from this same chat conversation that I had with Edna previously. So we're going to walk through and build another set of tabs out like this. But again, the console navigation is really creating this main tab, sub tab relationship, and it allows me to open a whole bunch of related records and look at them simultaneously. And this becomes fantastic for a customer support scenario because I'm able to look at the entire picture of what's going on with my customer. So I can see that I've got a case, that case came from this contact, that contact is associated with this account. Each one of these records has their own little piece of the puzzle that we're trying to solve for this particular customer. And then I can see I've got other related cases and previous conversations that I've had with this customer that are likely related to this particular case. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new tab. We're going to do an entire walkthrough of what I'm talking about when I say we're going to do a workspace transfer, and then we'll get into why it's important and how you might use that in your business operations. So to start all of this, I'm going to go over to our developer tools and I'm going to create a chat, and then I'm going to route it to myself. This works for any of the different conversation types that we support with Genesys Cloud. I'm just using a chat because it happens to be it happens to be very practical for doing demonstration purposes, because otherwise I'm going to wind up with someone talking on the phone in my ear, and that can be a little distracting and just makes the demo a little challenging to do. But for now, we're just going to go to our developer tools. So in developer.mypurecloud.com, I'm going to the web chat developer tool, and I'm going to send myself a chat and then put myself on queue and accept that chat. So we'll populate the fields, and we've got all of this information. Within the chat tools, I'm also able to add the custom attributes that drive our screen pops within our Salesforce integration. So I grabbed these out of our documentation at help.mypurecloud.com. And in this case, I'm just doing a search value for 1017. So when we get into the Salesforce environment, so you can see that I've started to chat. I'm going to say hi. We're going to log back into Salesforce, and I'm going to go ahead and put myself on queue. Once I go on queue, you'll see that this was alerting. I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. And you can see that this opened a new case, 1017. So that was actually the search criteria that I had. It went away, but that was the search criteria that I had on my developer tools. So I'm going to open up my chat widget, and we'll let that catch up. While I'm in here, I'm going to navigate around a little bit. So we're going to open up the contact record for Sean Forbes. We're going to open up his account at Edge Communication. We're going to see that we had a chat with him previously. Let's see, do I have any other interesting stuff? Well, we had a case that was related to that chat. So you can see that, my original screen pop was just this case number 1017. And then I opened up a whole bunch of sub tabs for things that were related to it. So, we can imagine this was a phone call. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be a chat conversation, could be a Facebook Messenger conversation that we're having. This could even be an email. So I'm digging around, researching, what all is related to this email. So I'm gonna have my conversation with Miguel here.
Miguel is somebody I think I want to get on the show as soon as possible.
Okay. But yeah, so I've had my conversation with Miguel, and we figure out, I'm not really the right person to help Miguel. So I'm going to do something for demonstration purposes that you may not necessarily do in your real workflow, but I'm going to take myself off queue. And the reason why I'm doing this is I'm going to transfer this back to my own queue so that we can see this same conversation come back and see that my screen pop was different. So again, I'm going to point out the original screen pop was just for case number 1017. So I didn't have any of this other information. So, I'd like to do a little bit of a thought exercise here. So let's imagine that this was a voice interaction. Okay, so I've got Miguel on the phone and I'm talking with him, and I see, okay, yeah, you work for Edge Communications, and Sean called in previously and he had this conversation with us about this other case that's also related to your new case. And I see all of that. Miguel, I'm really sorry. I'm not going to be the one who's able to help you with this, but I can get you over to another queue that is responsible for that particular topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place you on a brief hold. I'm going to call over there. I'm going to get someone on the line, and I'm going to explain what's going on. Now, what we're going to see when the interaction shows up on the other end is that all of this information that I've assembled is available in the second agent's screen pop. So I'm able to talk them through, hey, I've got Miguel on the line. He's calling about this particular case. You can see that Miguel works for this company, and this other person that works for the company talked to us back on 8/14/2019 about this other case. These things are all related. Here is the entire context of why Miguel's on the phone. So now when I make that transfer, the person on the other end doesn't have to go through and click all over the place within their CRM to find all of these things. And I'm able to very quickly and concisely convey all of these things and deliver all of that context to the person who's best going to be able to help the customer that I've got on the phone today. So this becomes an excellent mechanism to pass the baton around the organization and make sure that we're not having our customers repeat themselves. So this is a tool for delivering a world-class customer experience that you don't find in a lot of other tools, particularly integrated to Salesforce. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and transfer this interaction, and I'm going to select this transfer workspace option here. So this is something when you're setting up your integration inside of Salesforce, you can say allow workspace transfers. And the integration will actually automatically detect that I'm in the console navigation environment when that's enabled, and then give me the option to transfer the workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and say transfer it. I'm going to send it to my queue that I'm on. And you'll see that it tells me that there's no agents available. That's okay. I'm just going to send it off. It's going to ask me to wrap it up. I'm going to say default wrap up code. Great. We're going to go ahead and close this whole tab. So we can close this one too, and we'll just come back to our original tab that we were working on earlier. So now Miguel is hanging out waiting. It's still in queue because right now I was the only agent that was on that queue. I'm going to put myself back on queue. And you'll see that the interaction came back to me. I'm going to pick this up, and look at this. Instead of just the case, we've got the entire main tab and all of the subtabs that were associated with it came across as that screen pop. So we just saw when I initially ran this one through, I only had the single record as part of my screen pop. Then I went through and assembled all of that context, and I transferred the interaction to a queue and closed that tab. When it came back to me, I got all of that context that I originally assembled. This would be the same experience that the second agent would receive. When I transfer the interaction over to them, they would receive all of these, they would receive all 5 of these subtabs. Now I'm able to, open multiple main tabs, and as I navigate through here, so let's put ourselves back on case number 1016. You'll see that the integration actually picked up the new workspace that I'm working on. So I can go ahead and cancel this. I'm going to come back over here and go to transfer. You'll see it's picking up the currently selected main workspace. So there's nothing additional for the agent to sort out. They don't need to say, oh, well, this is the one that I really need to attach. And you'll see, even if I'm on the transfer screen and I'm navigating around, it's picking up the workspace that I'm on and saying, oh, you want me to transfer this thing? So I'm able to be working on multiple items simultaneously. I'm able to assemble a great amount of context around the problem that I'm working on and trying to resolve for my customer. And then I'm able to quickly take all of that work that I've done and ship it along to the next person within the organization so that they don't have to spend all of that time reassembling all of that context and trying to figure out, well, what is this total picture here? Why am I getting this thing, and what is it really referring to? So it's a mechanism to really allow your agents to be supercharged in terms of handling customer care issues because they're not starting from scratch every time they receive a new piece of information.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, Richard. I like that a lot. Let's see here. So I know the one thing you did in the presentation is you had to change your queue status, but that was simply for demoing, right? Like
Yep.
in a real life environment, you could transfer to another queue without having to switch that off.
Yep. So yeah, and that was really more, it's part of the magic show of a demo.
Right.
So what I was trying to do was I was trying to transfer it and allow it to just sit waiting in queue long enough for me to explain what was happening, and also to be able to close this tab. Because one of the things that Salesforce does for us is if we say, hey, screen pop to this thing that's already open, it doesn't open a new one. It just takes us to the one that's already open. So it wouldn't be as nice of a demo. It would just show me the screen that I was already on. So it kind of ruins the magic trick a little bit. So yeah, for demonstration purposes, you take yourself off queue, you transfer it into your queue, then you put yourself back on queue. And it's just a nice way to be able to press the pause button on your conversation for a minute and sort of set up what's about to happen. In a real life scenario, no, I would transfer this off to another queue and say, away you go. And then I would just get my next interaction and continue on working.
Perfect. Well, hey, thanks for letting us peek up your sleeve just a little bit on that excellent demo. Those were my questions. That was the only thing I really needed to clarify. But naturally, Richard isn't here to help me. He's here to help you all. So if you do have questions, please write in, post in the community. We'll do everything we can to get those answered. Richard, it looks like you're still with us. The T-Rex hasn't gotten you just yet. What do you think? You want to head into the community and answer a few questions?
Yeah, I think we can try that.
So here we are. It's that time of the show where we like to jump into the community and answer some questions. In a lot of instances, these questions have not been answered, but more importantly, we are trying to find the questions that interest Richard. Talking as we were getting ready for this segment, I mentioned there was a question about APIs. Now, just as a quick note, there is a developer community that you might want to try out for these, and you can find the link to that on our community's homepage. But Richard, this question about APIs came in from Antone. It was titled simply APIs. They write, hello, I would like to know if there is one or more API allowing from a customer telephone number, for example, to know all the interactions in progress of the same customer being treated or not treated. I can't find an API for this yet. Sounds a little bit like what you just showed with the Salesforce integration, but in this instance, I'm guessing Salesforce is not in use. What do you think, Richard? Any advice here?
So I would definitely take this over to the developer forums. We have a lot of developers within Genesys Cloud that are constantly monitoring those forums. And this is exactly the kind of thing that they answer. I do believe, so the question here is actually a little bit vague. So if there is some follow-up that you'd be able to answer or you'd be able to add to this when you take it over to the developer forum, that would be really helpful. So specifically around all the interactions, like what does it mean, all the interactions in progress of the same customer being treated or not treated? I don't know exactly what that means. So getting a little further description around that would be helpful, because that will help determine specifically what APIs you're going to be hitting. There are definitely APIs that show all of the interactions that are available based on particular criteria. So whether it's within a specific queue or whether it's globally, there are options for all of those things. You can also use the analytics API, which appears to be what you're tagging here, to facet based on historical conversations. And there's a lot of really clever stuff that can be done there. There's actually a relatively new API out there for querying conversations based on custom properties that have been added to it. So like we showed a little bit earlier, I was using that SF_search value to drive a screen pop. There's a relatively new API that lets you say, what are all of the conversations that have SF_search value in them? and then bring that back and generate a report on it. So you can look at, okay, what am I using to drive screen pops? What are the things that people are entering inside my IVR and getting tagged to interactions? So depending on the structure of how the conversations look in Antoine's use case, that may actually be the API that he's looking for. But the developer forum is the right place to go ask those questions. You may get a couple follow-up questions just saying, hey, tell me a little bit more about this so I can get you the right answer. But a lot of really friendly and intelligent people over there that are just looking to help out.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Richard. We actually had another one that came in that was specific to this episode. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it up right now. It came to us from Dean. And Dean wanted to know simply about Salesforce Q&A. Dean writes, just caught the Q&A show with Richard from November. Thanks for a great demo. As a follow-on, both Salesforce and Genesys Cloud have chat capabilities. Which to use? I have a solid idea about why you'd want to use that function in Genesys, but what's the Salesforce side of this story? Thanks, Dean. Dean, thanks so much for writing in. Richard, what do you think?
So again, a little bit of a vague question. I'd want to get a little bit more on this because obviously I'm not here to sell Salesforce. There are a lot of customers that have adopted Salesforce digital capabilities, either because they've been a Salesforce customer for a really long time, or there's a particular integration that they like. One of the things that Salesforce does remarkably well is integrate to their own product suite. So in particular, tying into elements like Salesforce Einstein and Salesforce Knowledge. Now, what's interesting, and this may be a subject of another Q&A show for a brief demo to show how this works, we've also created our own examples that show Genesys Cloud Chat integrating to Salesforce Einstein and Salesforce Knowledge. So the way our approach works in our example is we are broadcasting off the chat messages and then feeding that into a Salesforce Einstein intent model that we've trained based on our Salesforce knowledge repository. So we put a handful of articles into the repository. We've trained Einstein on those articles saying, these are the things that people are looking for. Try to match the intent of this conversation against these articles here. Then when it gives us a set of results and its confidence based on which articles are relevant, we display those in a little widget that runs alongside our integration in Salesforce. Now, the reason why I say this is an example and not something that's explicitly productized is because the training of that Einstein learning model is something that's specific to each of the Salesforce organizations. Everyone's going to have their own knowledge management articles that they've got in there. They're going to have their own, sort of custom language. And Genesys has a love of acronyms. So we have lots and lots of them, and you go through the resource center or some of our knowledge base articles and our FAQs. There are lots of really interesting acronyms out there. Those acronyms are going to be different and potentially mean different things depending on your business. So we can't pre-train those Einstein learning models for you. But what we can do is show people this is kind of how all of these pieces fit together, and then create tools that enable people to do really interesting things within their own Salesforce environment. So that's really the approach that we've tried to take. But we're trying to enable people to make the best use of that existing investment into their Salesforce platform. So people have gone and spent a bunch of time and money creating these Einstein bots and building out their Salesforce knowledge platform. We're not trying to tell them, oh, you need to throw that away and use our own learning management system or bring our own bots to the table. That would be kind of silly. That would be sort of closed. That would be not very platformy of us. And that's just not the way that we do things at Genesys Cloud. We really try to focus on being open and flexible and allowing people to bring the best technologies to bear on the problems that they need to solve. So using the Genesys Cloud platform within Salesforce is really no different. We want to make sure that you're using the tech that you've already invested in, that you're comfortable with. If there are other bots that we integrate with and you want to bring those to bear, great, we're all for it. You want to continue using the things that you've always used, and just take advantage of those benefits that were mentioned in the question, like unified reporting and better WEM capabilities, and maybe some better quality management. We'd love for you to make that leap with us. But we're trying to create flexible tooling that allows us to make the best of both platforms and really try to make everybody shine here.
Thank you for that detailed answer. I'm sure Dean will appreciate it. Richard, I just have one more question for you, and this one I'm really looking forward to getting to, because you may be familiar with another frequent collaborator of the Q&A show named George Ganault. Mm-hmm. Last week, he was on the Q&A show, and this question actually stumped him. And he said, "Isn't Richard your next guest? Because he could answer it much better than me." So let's see if George's instincts were correct.
It feels like a setup.
It might be, and it might be another pretty long answer, but what the heck? Let's see what we can do to help out Bastian, who I don't think has been on the show yet before, so welcome, Bastian. Upon receiving a phone call, change the Salesforce page to show the contact page of the caller. Bastian writes, "Hi, we have successfully implemented an integration between Salesforce and Pure Cloud in two possible ways, i.e. Salesforce called by Pure Cloud or the Pure Cloud agent desktop embedded within Salesforce. However, there is a very simple behavior which we would like to obtain. Upon receiving a phone call, if the caller's number is that of a known contact, we would like Salesforce to automatically display the Salesforce page of the contact. So far, we managed to open a new window with that page, but it seems obvious to us that agents may end up with too many windows on their screen if they do not close them during wrap-up. Hence, we want the current window to change and point to the contact page. Does anyone know how to do that?" While I was reading that question, I saw you were playing around on your screen, it looks like, Richard. Do you have something you'd like to show us?
Yes, I do. So I'm actually going to share my screen here, and I think that'll help kind of explain what's going on now.
Awesome.
There, I click the screen share button, and yes, I want to actually share my screen. Thank you, Zoom. All right.
It's not a trick.
Okay. So again, we should be looking at the Salesforce setup page.
Yep.
All right. Super. So on the Salesforce setup page, what we want to find is the soft phone layout. So when you're in setup, you can use their navigation search for soft phone. You're going to go to soft phone layouts. That's going to be here. We're going to, so I've only got a single soft phone layout. You can actually create multiple soft phone layouts and then assign them to different users. I really only have one because this is my demo environment, but I'm going to go ahead and edit my standard soft phone layout. The soft phone layout is actually a set of instructions that tells open CTI integrations like our Pure Cloud for Salesforce offering how it's supposed to behave in different scenarios. The way you're going to configure this is dependent on which of the Salesforce modalities you're using. So remember before I mentioned that there's really sort of four principal modalities. You've got sales, you've got service console, you've got lightning, and then you've got lightning with console navigation. It's important to note that this setting here to open in a new browser tab or window is just flat ignored in Lightning. So it's not something that the Lightning CTI honors at all. So we've actually had questions going the other way, saying in Lightning, I don't want to open the same tab. I want to open a new one. And I set this and it doesn't do anything. Well, that's why. In Lightning, it's just not supported. But in Salesforce Classic, this right here is the thing that actually governs that. So you would go in and you would edit your soft phone setting to say, I want to pop into the existing browser window. And then that will just keep you inside the same tab. The important thing to keep in mind is that if you're in sales mode and you pop in the same browser window, the whole UI is going to reload. So, that may not necessarily be desired behavior. So you're going to want to kind of weigh that one carefully. It may be better to, help train agents to close their tabs as soon as they're not needed, because you definitely can accumulate a whole bunch of browser tabs, and that can get to be problematic. But again, just trying to focus on the answer to the question at hand here. The soft phone layout is the thing that governs whether we're screen popping into a new tab or an existing tab. So you can just come in here, edit this, save it, and you can actually change the behavior for internal calls, inbound calls, and outbound calls independent of each other, and we'll honor all of that with our soft phone. So with this, because you may wind up with some unintended consequences and some grumpy agents who are mad that their whole screen just went away, or work that they were previously focusing on has now been lost because a new call came in.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that walkthrough, Richard. I appreciate it. I think that's going to be pretty much all the time we have today. But hey, thanks so much for making your second, technically third appearance on the show. Not sure if I told you, but the last time you were on, you gave us so much content. We broke it out in 2 different episodes, which was great because it allowed us to kind of like spread those out over the holidays. So that was fabulous. Richard, thank you so much for your time as always. And I definitely hope we get to see you again this season. I guess one more thing before we go. I understand you can't talk too much about it, but everybody watching the show should pay attention, especially if you're using Salesforce, should pay attention to our release notes that come out, I think the same day that this episode airs. Is that correct?
Yeah, specifically the release notes are going to be more focused on people who are interested in user automation. So yes, there will be some fun release notes coming out. We're going to be talking about that a lot more broadly towards the second half of this week.
Very cool. Maybe we can have you back on for another episode to discuss stuff like that. Richard, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yep, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, have a good one. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. We hope it was helpful and maybe a little bit entertaining. Each week, our host and experts review community discussions and debate what content to discuss, so your voice matters. Did we miss something? Do you have a question for the show? Let us know. Join the conversation at the Genesys online community. As a Genesys customer or partner, you can create an account. Just click the sign in button found on most pages and follow the necessary instructions to create an account. Also, feel free to email us at qashow@genesys.com. We'd love to hear from you. If this is your first episode, welcome. You can view our entire archives. Go to the Helpful Links panel found on most community pages and find the QA Show archive that interests you. We appreciate your support of the show and the community. Cheers!